Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am Vanessa Bing. I'm a faculty member in the Social Science Department at LaGuardia, and I am leading a conversation this afternoon that brings me together with two incredible faculty from English, Tuli Chatterji and Belkis Gonzalez, and Wendy Nicholson from the Student Affairs Division, who is my co-facilitator for the CTL seminar diversity, equity, and inclusion across the curriculum and campus. So I just want to take a minute to talk about how this seminar was originated. So it really came in response to a need that existed at the college, a need that continues to exist. In 2018, the Faculty and Staff of Color Collective, which I co chair with Jason Hendrickson, we initiated a racial climate survey. This racial climate survey was the first in LaGuardia's history, and this survey highlighted some issues that came out in two earlier coach survey. The coach survey is a faculty survey that identifies or allows faculty to express their experiences, in the workplace. And in the 2015 and 2018 coach survey, faculty of color and women faculty identified disparate experiences. They felt they were not being mentored. There were challenges in terms of the promotion and tenure process. So the 2018 Faculty and Staff of Color survey sought to dive a little deeper and get a sense of the experiences of not only faculty, but staff at LaGuardia as well, because the previous surveys did not seek to get the input and the experience of faculty. So from the survey, we learned that we really need to do a deep dive and look at the experiences of all members of the college, but particularly those faculty and staff of color. In addition, I would say that the events of the past year really has unearthed a lot. We know that the COVID-19 pandemic, the social unrest in the world, the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and so many more brought a lot of protests out into the streets. And, these things were happening out in the world, but it was also happening and being experienced by the people who work at LaGuardia. So many of the concerns of faculty and staff were vocalized in, email exchanges. Wendy Nicholson wrote a statement that shared her reactions and experience to an event. And we realized there were a lot of issues that were being unearthed around concerns around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we really came together, Wendy Nicholson and I, and crafted an idea to introduce a seminar of diversity, equity, and inclusion across the curriculum and campus that the Center for Teaching and Learning supported in its delivery. And we're so appreciative that the CTL sought it to provide this space for professional development for faculty and staff at the college to really think about how issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion impact our lives here at the college as well as outside of the college. Indeed, we've learned, among other things, that many faculty and staff have experienced issues of microaggression here on campus, which for many people was rather surprising because we take pride in the fact that LaGuardia is an incredibly diverse campus. We have a diverse student body. Faculty and staff are represented by diverse individuals. And but unfortunately, while we do diversity well, many of us have begun to question how well we do the sort of equitable piece, the inclusion piece. So the hope is that this seminar that was created would begin to provide a way of heightening awareness to these issues and concerns and would create a space to open up dialogue along across the campus. And this seminar is really I think it's special and important to us because it really does bring together the entire college. This is the first effort where a faculty member is co-leading with a staff member of the college. And we think that's important to bring down walls and barriers that exist across the campus. We don't want to have a space where there is perceived hierarchy, where faculty's on top and we don't care about the staff. That is not the case. In order for this institution to function in a way that matters to all of us and where everyone feels valued, everyone has to be involved in this effort. So I am gonna, as we go into this dialogue, we're gonna sort of hear about the experiences of the faculty participant. We're gonna hear from my co-facilitator of the seminar, what it's been like thus far in the 2 meetings that we've held to date. So Wendy, I'd like if you could share with those listening, what is the sort of makeup of the seminar? Like who's in it? Like what are the issues covered? What are the topics? I mean, like, what are we doing with this seminar? And if you could
Great, thank you, Vanessa. So this seminar really is something that I think is absolutely needed, which is what you said, and I'm happy that we have the makeup in the group that we have. So amongst our 12 or so participants, we cover humanities, social sciences, CUNY START, health sciences, me and I work in the career office. So we cover a variety. We have people in the English department. And so we get to see the college from these varied perspectives because each person is going to receive whatever treatment they receive at the college from their lens, from their perspective. And they're going to understand what's going on, again, from that same perspective, from their educational background, their racial makeup, so forth. And so it's a good mix so that we can really have some robust discussions about our particular topics, right? And so what we've tried to do is look at different topics around diversity, equity, inclusion, right? Most times when you say DEI, people automatically think race, but diversity means so much more. And so we're looking at racial diversity, gender and sexual diversity, building inclusive spaces for underrepresented bodies on campus, perhaps those with disabilities or the formerly incarcerated. So we're trying to look at several different lenses and what does it mean and how do we now take this information that we're discussing and learning back into our various areas and how do we make a difference? How do we impact those particular areas based on what we're learning? Because sometimes something will come up in a session and you just go, oh, I never thought about that before, or I never saw it that way, or I never thought someone else felt that way. And so this is why it's really important for us to begin having these discussions, but not leave it just at the point of discussion. We need to get to the point of action. And I think that's where this seminar is an impetus for that, because our participants are going to create either something for their curriculum, something new in their classroom, a project, an event, something that is an action step that now will take we're going from pedagogy to praxis, actually, right? So it's going into action, which is the point that we really are trying to do here.
Wendy, are there particular readings or texts or authors whose work you feel that it's important that we're using or we're looking at in the seminar? Can you say a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So we've taken real intention in looking at the types of readings that we're offering to our participants, as well as different videos that provide information for them. But I think for me, 2 of the authors that we're looking at, Bell Hooks and Bettina Love, are really foundational because they talk about particular theories and actions comprehensively, right? Not just race particularly, but so for example, Bettina Love talks about, abolitionist work. And so a lot of what she proposes is not just reforming these systems that we have, not reforming systemic racism, because that just means that you're putting a different name on it or a different hue on it, a color or something, but it's still the same thing. She's talking about abolition works. That means really completely dismantling it and creating it in a new way, right? So that everyone is included and everyone is inclusive. So I think those two works are really foundational to what we're doing. And it pertains not just to race, even though that's specifically where they're looking at.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Wendy. So I want to bring in the voices of our two faculty participants. And I want to start by asking each of you, the question. All right. So let's talk about the terms diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So that's part of the title of the seminar. It caught you, captured your attention, we're assuming, right? So what do these terms mean to you? And, what motivated you when you read the title of the seminar, when you read the blurb? What motivated you to participate in this seminar? So how about, can we start with you, Tuli? Uh, let's talk about, yeah, what do these terms mean to you and what made you participate in the seminar?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Vanessa and Wendy, for having me in the seminar. And I'm so grateful to both of you and to all our participants. So, diversity for me means recognizing and celebrating the differences around us. The world has always been diverse. With regards to inclusion, I find it a bit challenging, but to me, it means that when one is heard, valued, or seen without asking for it. And equity is like providing access to those for whom certain opportunities or resources have been like systematically denied. Because there can be no inclusiveness if we do not acknowledge differences, and there will be no equity if we do not accept that everyone do not have equal access to advantages. So there is a Sanskrit phrase from the Upanishads, which was written around about 800 BC, and that inspires me a lot. It says like Vasudeva Kutumbakam, which means the world is one family, and we have to take care of our family members. So, my main motivation to participate in this seminar was because I'm deeply passionate about the work that is being done at LaGuardia on DEI, and I want to assist my colleagues and friends in this shared goal. And I also wanted to enhance my knowledge on DEI theories because that I was not familiar with prior to joining LaGuardia or when I was teaching in India. So, as someone with an international experience, both as a student and a teacher, I feel the seminar will help me to become more aware of the literature and the experiences of the community. And I want to bring the two worlds together so that I can contribute more and be more receptive to the needs of LaGuardia. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And we are so happy that you are in the seminar, Tuli. You bring so much, and I really appreciate the world is our family. So, yes. Belkis, what about you? These terms, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Yeah, what do those terms mean to you? And yeah, what pulled you into this seminar?
Well, first of all, I also want to thank you and Wendy for making this space possible, for bringing this DEI professional development seminar into being and creating a way for us to have dialogues across campus, bringing together faculty and staff to talk about how we can make LaGuardia more truly inclusive. As you mentioned, Vanessa, it's already diverse, but we need to build on that diversity to make it truly inclusive. So I might as well start there, right, with what that term means to me. To me, diverse is a descriptive term. Diversity is a descriptive term, and any group of people will be diverse. The issue is that diversity is not always acknowledged, let alone valued. And I think that at LaGuardia, we're particularly fortunate in that we draw from all over the city, all over the world, and are rooted in Queens, which is by some accounts one of the most diverse places on the planet Earth. So we have a tremendous resource there that is primed for us to enrich and build into an inclusive and equitable community. So about inclusion, to me, that's about a sense of belonging. It's about having one's own perspective recognized and valued, feeling that there aren't parts of one's identities, recognizing that identities are multiple and are intersectional, that there aren't a part of those identities that have to be checked at the door in ways that are even not always conscious, for us to feel that we can participate in a class, be present in a classroom, join a college campus. Regarding equity, for me, that's primarily about access. It's a question of access, and it gives us a lens onto the divide of privilege, whether it's privilege based on racial identity, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, ability. And it's a term that holds us accountable for living up to our stated values, for being the kind of individual or the kind of institution that we aspire to be. Holding us accountable and challenging us to always be mindful, to raise our awareness of who may be excluded, who may be silenced, who may be rendered invisible by our practices. And I also think working for equity is necessarily a question of challenging power. It necessitates challenging power, because you can't work for equity without working for the redistribution of resources. And that's difficult work. It is uncomfortable work often, but it is crucially important work, vital work. So for all those reasons, I'm very happy to be a part of this seminar. More directly, what motivated me to be in this seminar, really, it's a question of my pedagogical commitment, my personal values, and my background as well, my personal background. So I'll take values first. For a very long time, I have been involved in social justice movements, particularly around gender and sexuality and about immigrants' rights. So involvement in this seminar was a natural outgrowth of those longstanding commitments. With regard to personal background, I am an immigrant as a queer woman, a first-generation college student, and someone who learned English as a second language. I have firsthand experience of how painful it can be to feel excluded in ways that are sometimes deliberate by others, but often unintended, but no less painful. And I feel that that firsthand experience motivates me and also equips me to contribute to the efforts at LaGuardia to make our campus community more inclusive and equitable. So that's firsthand background, personal background. With regard to pedagogical commitments, I feel very, very strongly that inclusive pedagogy is effective pedagogy. I feel that these are inseparable. And so wanting to participate in the seminar is just part of wanting to be an effective teacher and being committed to continuously examining my teaching practice with that goal in mind. I'll just take one example. One of the great readings that were provided to us in the seminar was from Columbia University about best practices for inclusive pedagogy. And that document offered 5 principles. And those 5 principles are establish a classroom climate that fosters belonging, set explicit student expectations, set course content that recognizes diversity, design course for accessibility, and be reflective in one's teaching practice. Every single one of those things are things that an effective teacher knows that they must do. So I think that these are synonymous terms, inclusive pedagogy and effective pedagogy. And also, we know that the full diversity, bringing in the full diversity of student experiences to bear on the subject matter that we're engaging with in the classroom is part of developing the critical thinking of the students, that the students are thereby enabled to turn to each other as resources to enhance their learning, and that it's part of our goal of academic excellence at LaGuardia. It's inextricable from that. And lastly, I want to say that I think that inclusive pedagogy helps us move our assumptions from the subconscious level to the conscious level, and to give us a framework for challenging our own assumptions in student needs, in the design of assignments, in the selection of readings, and that's also part of the work of effective pedagogy.
Thank you, Belkis. You covered so much, and I so appreciate the way that you sort of integrated and acknowledge your multiple identities that you bring with you in your various spaces, right? Because we don't get to separate our immigrant status, our gender, our sexuality, right? We bring all of that into our space and in our interactions with students, and that plays a critical role in how we're seeing and how we experience others. And I was going to ask each of you, right, how you felt this seminar would benefit you as a faculty, just as a person and the member of the larger community. And Belkis, you so beautifully spoke to all of those pieces. So I appreciate that. I'm going to get to my co-facilitator, Wendy, in a second, but Tuli, is there anything you want to add in terms of the various roles that you hold as a faculty member, as a member of the community, that, how this seminar will impact those different parts of you? Is there anything you want to add?
I'll just kind of add a few sentences to what Belkis wonderfully captured. There was this place in Bettina Love's Like We Who Are Dark, that text where she focuses on the cultures, race, gender, sexuality, abilities, religion, and spirituality. And that kind of something, like these complicated identities, cannot be discussed or examined in isolation, that we are everything and we matter. These all are aspects of our identities matters. And I felt like seeing spirituality was also like bringing in foregrounding like cultures or voices or identities, which uh, for whom the spiritual aspect means a lot. So I felt like as someone who started, for whom LaGuardia is my first exposure to American education system curriculum, and it was pretty it was a bit stressful at the beginning, but when I started to bring the world together, I felt that so much could be achieved when we walk together. Because this everything that Belkis mentioned, these different aspects, they create a different energy, different vibration, and that is so powerful, so beautiful. And I feel like this seminar will help us to capture those different voices, and also give us an opportunity how we could create something new, how we could, as Wendy mentioned, like take it to different spaces and also share with others, and together we can truly create an inclusive campus. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuli. So, Wendy, you've heard from our two participants in terms of what DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion means to them. Did their words resonate for you? And, what did you like? What pulled you to want to co-lead this seminar, you know? Yeah, you and I, we have a great relationship, but I think that it was more than that that wanted you to be a part of this seminar.
That we do. I guess the motivation for me has been lifelong. Um, I remember as a little girl, um, back when we were talking about Black is power and just looking at Black females and saying, wow, I'm going to grow up to be someone like one of these women. So it was, on one hand, very empowering for me to see some Black women in, influential roles and who were speaking out and doing their thing, but at the same time, trying to understand and integrate why I was being treated differently by other people. And so this has been a lifelong thing for me, and it's just always been a part of me. And, even to this point, looking at all of those different experiences over life and now having a way to frame it. So my doctoral studies center around racial battle fatigue, which is that trauma that people of color experience having had these compounded daily instances of indignities, whether it's about your skin color, your hair, what have you. And so this has always been an issue that that has been important to me. Now, in terms of the words diversity, equity, inclusion, I'm glad you asked what their definitions are of those words, because here's the problem that we have in general, but specifically at LaGuardia as well. If you notice, the only word that they used the same sort of frame about was equity, and it was not even quite the same there, right? Tuli said it was equal access. Belkis said it was just access. But how do we work towards diversity, equity, or inclusion if none of us are talking about the same definition? Because if I say it's this and you say it's that, how do we work towards it? Because we're working towards different things. So we're not going in the same direction, and we're not going in the same direction at the same time, right? So at the very basis of this, we need to come to specific, concrete definitions of those words. Now, out in society, it means this, it means that, and that's fine. But what do we mean when we say it at LaGuardia? And what does that mean for the work that we're doing and how we're going to do it? So, Belkis and Tuli spoke about, their pedagogy and inclusive pedagogy. That's great. But what happens when those students aren't in class, right? So that's a faculty issue, and we need to work on that. Because again, if we're talking about diversity in the classroom, what does that mean? Does it mean that we have different types of faculty in the classroom? Does it mean we have different types of students in the classroom? Does it mean that the work that we're using are by different voices in the classroom? And does it mean that diversity, equity, inclusion are only included in ethnic studies, racial studies, English when you're writing about it? Or does it include your STEM classes? And what does that mean, right? That could include, you need to have works by scientists of color or scientists who are other gendered, whatever that might mean for them, right? So it's not just these specific areas that we talk about, diversity, equity, inclusion, but you can have that in a science class, right? You can talk to your students. If you're an engineer, what does diversity, equity, inclusion mean for you as an engineer? What does it mean for you in this classroom? What does it mean for how you interact with other people? Because the same students that come to the classroom have to now come to advising office, career office, bursar. How do they treat the people that they meet there, and how are they treated by the people they meet there? So it's such a huge issue. But at the very basis of it, we need to know what we're talking about when we say diversity, equity, and inclusion. And until we do that, we're going to have a difficult time trying to really push this agenda forward, but it's something that we absolutely need to do.
Thank you, Wendy. I also want to take a moment because I'm was really remiss. I to say at the beginning that Wendy is an incredible co-facilitator, but Priscilla Stadler of the CTL has also been amazing in partnering with us in delivering this very important seminar. So a shout out to Priscilla. So, okay, we've had a couple of meetings thus far this term in terms of the seminar. Um, I'd like to ask Tuli and Belkis, what stands out for you in terms of what's come out in the seminar or what you've learned from your colleagues? What's, anything that was a singular takeaway, something that was like a pearl or just something that from the introductory session to the last session on that focused on racial diversity, what struck you as you left? So why don't we start with Belkis?
It's going to sound a little corny, probably, but for me, the singular takeaway was a sense of joy along with an urgency. I felt almost like it was uncapping a bottle. And I feel like I tapped into the tremendous sense of urgency and commitment that there is at LaGuardia among faculty and staff to talk about DEI issues. And I think one reason that it was a joyful discussion, although a very rigorous and challenging one, is because the work of promoting DEI in our various range of the work that we do at LaGuardia, whether as faculty or staff, is often very solitary work. It's difficult work, it's taxing work, it requires us to engage with our own sense of battle fatigue, whatever that might look like for us, and to work through it, find a way to push through that wall. And to have an opportunity to engage with faculty and staff and feel that support was very powerful. I also appreciated deeply the opportunity to hear from staff and learn from their various perspectives on the institution. I feel that it broadened my understanding of LaGuardia as an institution. I'm very grateful for that opportunity. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Belkis. And Tuli?
Yes, to kind of reiterate Belkis's words, that I felt like really grateful to be a part of this dialogue with my colleagues from both student affairs and academic affairs, like whose knowledge, commitment, and work I greatly, deeply value and respect. And with the two sessions that we had, I felt like the space opened for us. There was like opening up in the sense that listening and this whole like a feeling a connection, like someone is sharing my story, like knows me, understanding it just was extremely joyful. And like listening to the perspectives and interpretation of like when we watched the video, how each one of us understood it, how we felt connected. And I also loved working on the social identity pie that helped me like closely reflect on how my different identities intersect and made me kind of think like what part of identity, what parts of my identity do I bring at workplace? What parts of people's identity get activated when we view each other? Like how I am viewed, how I view, how authentic, what all it's like a just wonderful conversation popped up, like with that social identity pie. So I am very thankful of all these like wonderful, thoughtful exercises, like activities which you have thought for to help us again to open up the space for more discussions. Thank you.
Thanks, Tuli. And I have to give credit where credit's due. That great exercise came out of a CTL seminar that I participated in, the Women and Gender Sexuality Seminar. Anita Bash and Aliyah Abdullah Mata led last semester. So yeah, the first time I did that exercise, I thought it was great. And I said, we need to do that in this seminar. So, all right, Wendy, and I have a few more questions and we're racing against the clock, but I want to ask Wendy, um, based on, being in the seminar as a co-facilitator and some of the issues you've been hearing, like what are some primary issues or concerns that, you're representing student affairs, right? You're in the CUNY leads and you're hearing from faculty, you're hearing from staff members who are participants, you know, what should student affairs staff be thinking about? Or another way of considering this question is, how can student affairs staff, right, benefit from the type of dialogue that's coming out of this seminar? What are your thoughts about that, Wendy?
Wow. Well, we all can benefit from what's coming out of the seminar, which is why we're doing it, right? I mean, this really needs to be done on a much larger scale as well. I mean, the things that we need to look at is sometimes it's the optics of things. How does something look, right? We talk about diversity, and diversity, equity, inclusion is not a LaGuardia problem, right? It's a higher ed problem. It's a society problem. So we can talk about being diverse. And so, yeah, you grab any bunch of people at LaGuardia and we're diverse because we all have these different parts of us and we look different and we sound different. But when you begin to really drill down on what that looks like, if all of your top leadership looks one way and everybody else looks a different way, are you really diverse, right? What does that mean? So then that begins to sort of flow into that equity and inclusion issue. And so we need to be clear about what those are and how we do what we do, how we make the decisions we make. So, talking about accountability and transparency, how do we make the decisions that we make? And if there are policies that aren't quite meeting our needs, then how do we go about changing them, right? But whose voices need to be included in those changes, and how do we do that? And this work, Belkis, you're absolutely right. I always say that the work of social equity is complicated and complex. It's dirty, it's messy. It really will pull at you. And some days you'll have real highs because something looks great. And some days you'll have real lows because you have yet another instance of something that just shouldn't be, right? But it's work that has to happen, right? And we need to keep moving on that. And so, student affairs, yes, we need to look at what is our makeup and how do we ensure that we are more equitable in what we do and how we do and how we treat people, right? Because you can't just be nice to those who look like you and then treat everybody else differently, right? And that happens in general. That's just society. It happens. And so, there are ways where this information cannot just stay here, which is why I said we have to move from thought and conversation to actual action and hold people accountable for their actions.
So, Wendy, the issues that you raise really speak to the institutional culture. So, I really want us to think for a moment about the type of institutional change that can come from this work. Now, you've alluded to a number of them, but I'm aware, we're all aware, most of us are aware that since this seminar has started, or really, I mean, this seminar was planned last year, but since that time, the institution LaGuardia will be hiring a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I think would be great. So I'm curious, what does a position such as this and the ongoing work of a seminar like this, like, how does that have real impact on the college community and in institutional change?
Oh, I actually think that would have great impact. I mean, to have a particular person who is, how do I say, the traffic cop, so to say, in terms of this work, in looking at the institution as a whole. What do we do well? what do we need to improve and how do we do that, right? And so that begin to centralize a lot of our information and our work. And that begins, again, those definitions and what is our mission in terms of this work. What are our objectives? When do we want to do this? How do we want to do this? And we've got to think about it in systems, right? We talk a lot about LaGuardia and the silos. We need to bust those silos, right? Because let's give you an example. You talk about enrollment, right? We need students for the college to run, right? What kind of students do you need? Are you looking in all the different places that you can look to recruit students to LaGuardia? Okay, great. Our numbers are up. Do we have the faculty and staff in place to meet the needs of those students? Are we giving them the type of work that they need, right? So then that's a different type of recruitment, right? That's on the staff and on the employees side. And then are we teaching the different ideas that these students need? And if not, where do we find those people? And do we have money for it? So there's all these different issues that, one area impacts so many different areas. So to have one person, and I don't mean that this person is solely responsible, but for, one person who's there looking at these issues and then tapping into all of the different areas that go into it, because this work will not be successful if it is completely bottom up, nor will it work if it's completely top down. It has to be both at the same time, right? Because you need the folks who on that policy level who look at what we do, but we need to know how it's implemented on the lower levels and how do those things work together. So I think that position is absolutely instrumental. And I think that President Adams' foresight in, requesting that position was really pertinent to the work that we do, particularly if you look at our last year and all that we've gone through, even at LaGuardia, but in general, and the way that things are framed. I think that position is going to be something that will help us to really become this inclusive environment that we always say that we want. I think it's really important.
Thanks, Wendy. And so one of my sort of last questions or so for Belkis and Tuli, thinking about institutional change really having impact on the culture of LaGuardia. Your participation in the seminar, how do you see that ultimately going sort of beyond your classrooms, perhaps impacting your departments? Like, what are you hoping for in terms of broader change? I mean, Wendy beautifully spoke to how, as an institution, we need to sort of go beyond. I'm curious for each of you. Will this seminar shape your thinking in terms of your scholarly work, beyond what you do in the classroom? Sort of like, what are you sort of thinking or hoping for? Let's start with Tuli.
Sure. So I feel like this seminar, the readings which I was taking a look for this week for our upcoming presentation for our upcoming week, it's that it ties so closely with my own research and scholarship as well as my pedagogical practices. Mm-hmm. So for my research, scholarship, and pedagogy, it mostly centers on world literature, global learning, and also my focus is on South Asian queer studies. And I've been using culturally relevant pedagogy models, mostly informed by the theories of Gloria Ladson-Billing, Geneva Gay, and others. And they have informed and shaped my classroom practices phenomenally. And I feel like that this seminar will help me to expand my ideas about the theories. Like I went through bell hooks, then different Asian American studies readings that have been posted. And I feel like that will also strengthen the work that I do both in class and outside class. For instance, like I formed the LaGuardia Humanitarian Initiative, like as an inclusive platform where students, staff, and faculty could translate their classroom learning and lived experiences into serving our local and global communities. It's all about that access. And I'm incredibly grateful to the ASAP program, advisors Stephanie Adino, Esther Rosa, and Rocio Rosado, then the CUNY Service Corps, Jacqueline Nava, and to Dima Bayratar, our Director of Women's Center, for making this happen, because it takes a village. All of us need to come together to put this vision, the theory, into praxis. And this year, we are partnering with our Center for Immigrant Education and Training of the ACE program to support the families of our student parents whose education has been impacted by COVID. We are also collaborating with local NGO like Make the Road, where we provided volunteering opportunities for our students, doing a fundraising so that they can so that 2 of our students could develop leadership skills and serve the community, like police brutality, fighting police brutality, marginalization of communities, minority communities, then COVID-19 response. There are so many things that we could achieve when we are doing together. Then we are also partnering with this global NGO Amal Alliance, where we are providing access to education to the Rohingya refugee children who are all victims of trauma in the camps in Bangladesh. And I want to give a shout out to Professors Catherine Almandrel and Michelle de Goes-Almond from the ELA department, who with their students are developing lesson plans for the refugee children. So it's all about providing access to those who do not have it. And I also feel like an institutional point of view, as a co-chair of the Senate Professional Development Subcommittee of Diversity and Inclusion, our work like organizing microaggressions workshop, like collaborating with faculty, staff of color collective, then showing up for racial justice and other affinity groups, is that this vision, this coming together and working towards diversity and inclusion, not just the week in November, but throughout the year, has its effect. And that I feel like when we have the new hire, is that we could all be with the person to help make this vision, what Wendy said, successful. That is not bottom to top or top to bottom, it's all of us working together. And I'm also a member of the Asian Heritage Committee and started LaGuardia's Asian American Voices Journal. So to help our Asian students celebrate the diversity of Asia and in turn make them feel at home so that they feel included here at LaGuardia. And I again want to take this opportunity to thank Drs. Anita Baksh, Payal Doctor, Tomonori Nagano, Koyoko Toyama, for all our students for nurturing this vision. And for the collaboration, I would really love to see more collaboration between academic affairs and student affairs to happen, so that we could devise doable strategies for all our colleagues across spaces and departments. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuli. All right, and Belkis, your final thoughts in terms of what this seminar is bringing to you, how it's going to impact your scholarly work, broader work at the college.
I feel that most fundamentally, my participation in this seminar helps to do the work of demolishing the silos that Wendy referred to earlier, not only between faculty and staff, but also among academic departments. And it serves Converse as a bridge to collaborate with initiatives on campus, such as the Faculty and Staff of Color Collective, Standing Up for Racial Justice, the push for universal design and learning at LaGuardia, or for supporting multilingual students at LaGuardia, and regarding multilingualism as a resource for our classrooms rather than operating on a deficiency model. So yes, building bridges and demolishing silos, I feel like are at the heart of this work for me.
Thank you, Belkis. So I think we are at the end of our meeting here, and I just want to say it's been a real honor and privilege to be in this space with all of you. Wendy, my co-facilitator, I cannot do this without you, and Priscilla. I also want to give a shout to the other folks in CTL, Michelle Piso Manukian, You are very much a part, you're a participant as well as someone who often raises really important issues that really inspires the work that we do. I would be really remiss if I didn't acknowledge a former staff member of the college, Rosemary Talmadge, who really started a lot of dialogue in years past to deal with difficult dialogue across differences, religious diversity. Rosemary was such a valued member of LaGuardia, who provided so many opportunities for us as a community to address issues of difference, diversity, issues of equity and inclusion. In fact, Rosemary was instrumental in helping to create Surge, showing up for racial justice here on campus, because she was um, sickened when she heard of some of the experiences of faculty and staff of color around microaggressions. So a lot of this work, those of us who were touched by Rosemary will be continuing in her honor and what she brought to the college. But this is really important work, and I'm so privileged to have people like Tuli and Belkis and all of the other faculty and staff who signed up for this seminar. Um, Wendy, as my co-facilitator, do you have any final words you want to offer in this space?
Yeah, I too want to thank CTL for the opportunity to do this, because I think we had this conversation that this is the first time that a staff member has been able to facilitate or co-facilitate one of these sessions. And that just speaks to the work that we're doing, right? So that there's this openness to going ahead and making change. And we just need to continue. This is the pebble that was thrown into the pond. And now we need to make sure those ripples continue to go out to the greater college community.
Thank you, Wendy. So with that, I'm going to wish you all a lovely afternoon, and thank you all again for being a valued participant, co-leader. Um, Thank you, Thomas Raspigliosio, for supporting this presentation today, and wishing you all a really great rest of the day and rest of the semester. Bye.